Kadosh, Erev Tov, we're speaking about now the entire importance of Shmirat Shabbat. This is Parashat Bereshit Or HaChaim HaKadosh, because we just mentioned that especially when we want to come and help, when protect, whether it's ourselves, or whether we're going to come and protect, whether it's ourselves or other people, right? When we're going to come and protect, what do we have to understand? Whether it's going to be our brothers in Eretz Yisrael or the Chayalim, the most important thing is Shmirat Shabbat. By the way, V'Zakeni, they actually came out that they were trying to get the 50,000 women that they have on their entire list. They have 50,000 women every single Shabbat that they come. They light candles, they give tzedakah, and they're trying to get them that they should accept upon themselves 10 minutes Shabbat earlier this Shabbat. So therefore, again, it's the same concept of having Shmirat Shabbat that it's going to be. So they wanted to have 50,000 hours of extra Shmirat Shabbat. So imagine if every single person would accept upon themselves 10 minutes of Shabbat earlier, imagine what a strength it actually has. So here in Parashat Bereshit it says, he finished, right? Hashemayim v'aretz and everything that happened. Hashem finished on the seventh day. He's going to stop on the seventh day. He's going to bless the seventh day. Right? He stopped from a work that created. Says the Midrash. The Midrash says, Rabbi She'elo Rabbi Ishmael ben Rabbi Yosef. Comes Rabbi, right? Ishmael. Rabbi asks Rabbi Ishmael ben Rabbi Yosef. Amarlo, he says, Shamata me'avicha, I heard from your father. What does it mean by Chal Elohim b'yom hashvi? What does it mean by Chal Elohim b'yom hashvi? Amarlo, he says, Kazeo shehu makeh bekanas al gabei sadan. Higbia be'od yom v'orida meshetechshach. He comes and he says, you're picking up the hammer and you're going to bang down. He says, you picked it up and then you took it down when it's nighttime. Says Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, "Basav adam sheni yodea lo yitav lo regav lo sha'atav." We don't know the exact moment. So since we don't know the exact moment of Shabbat, we always have to be mosif mechol ala kodesh. Yeah, we always have to be mosif mechol ala kodesh. Okay, so he says, "Gniva v'rabotenu gniva man mashal lemelech she'asa lo chuppah v'tzaira v'kira u'ma yita chuppah chasera kala." He says, imagine he's coming and preparing an entire chuppah. But the kuppah is missing one thing. Where's the kala? You're missing the kala. What does the help of chuppah without a kala? So he comes and he says, kala shetikanes etocha. So he says, kach ma ya'olam chaser. What was missing in the world? Shabbat. Rabotenu omrim mashal lemelech she'asu lo tabat. Ma yita chasera chotam, the seal. Ma ya'olam chaser Shabbat. And that's one of the things. V'chal lo'im b'yom hashvi'i, v'yishmo b'yom hashvi'i. And that's why in Zeminot of Leil Shabbat we say, tzinu shevach v'shira la'el asher Shabbat bara. And then he came and he gave us a Torah. What does that mean? He comes and he says, it's technically speaking like a stira, right? What exactly are we trying to look for? But rather, is it really be'emet that it's taking away from the melacha? Or is it that you're doing something new, a new creation? And again, Asher Shabbat bara, he created the Shabbat. It's not just something that you're taking it away, you're bringing something. It's a Bria Chadasha, and that's what the Netivot Shalom, the Slonimer Rebbe also says, that he comes and he says, who's talking about the greatness of Shabbat, he comes and he says, it's not heder of the Uchlila, Greida, but rather what? HaShabbat is a Mitziyut Chiyuvit. It's a new creation. And it's a Bria Chadasha that we're coming, and we're strengthening ourselves in Shabbat. Now he comes and he says like this, Chazal and Shulchan Aruch says, that a person that's in the desert, and he doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know what time is Shabbat. He got confused. He doesn't know what day it is. He's lost. What does he do? So the question is, what does it help now that he comes and he says, you know what, he's going to count 7 days, makes a Shabbat. He could be completely wrong. So what does it help now in his counting? What's he trying to do exactly? So he comes and he says like this. The Gemara Masechet Shabbat, Samechet Amubet says, Amar Avuna, Haya me'alech b'midbar. Person's in the desert. He doesn't know when is the Shabbat. So he does 6 days and he watches over 1 day. Right? What's a machloket? Is it kriyato shel adam? Okay, fine. Says Rashi there, which means you're going to count once you lost count. When you lost count, you're going to now start the count. Because if you know the count, there's nothing what to talk about. Obviously, you lost the count. So now when you lost the count, start counting the 6 days. And the 7th day is going to be Shabbat. Okay? And that's what's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch Siman Shin Mem Dalid, but it's Shin Dalid Mem, because we don't want to call it Shmad, so we say Shin Dalid Mem. The Shulchan Aruch says somebody that's going in the desert, Ve'eno Yodea Matai Shabbat, doesn't know when it's Shabbat, From the day that he forgets, now he's going to start counting. And then the seventh day is going to become holy. And if he has malit panes, now every single day might be Shabbat. So if he's got food, he's not allowed to work. He has to wait, right? Then he does every single melacha every day, even on the day shenit kadesh bo. Okay, fine. Now the question is, what's going on exactly? Right? How do we explain that it becomes kadosh? So there's the Gemara Masechet Shabbat, Daf Kuf Yutet. Daf Kuf Yutet Umbet says the Gemara, Vaychulu. He says the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It says this. Damar Avuna Kol Mitpalel Be'erev Shabbat VaOmer Vaychulu. When you come and you say Vaychulu Hashamayim Va'aretz, you become a shutaf, a partner with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. In what? Ma'aseh Bereshit. Ata niyeta shutaf, you become Hashem's partner. So he says, what does that mean? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Vaychulu HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'zeh shemesaper b'shivcho shel makom u'v'shevach shel Shabbat. We're saying the praises of Shabbat, which means that when you come and you start saying Vaychulu Hashamayim Va'aretz, you're actually becoming a partner with Hashem. And therefore, that's what it is. By the way, based upon this is the famous machloket, whether it's between the Mishnah Berurah and the Chazon Ish. What happens if I'm in the middle of Amidah? And all of a sudden they come and they start saying, Vaychulu Hashamayim Va'aretz. I finish my Amidah. Yeah? Do I need to grab somebody else and say Vaychulu Hashamayim Va'aretz or not? So says the Mishnah Berurah, of course. Why? It's a dut. Comes the Chazon Ish and he argues, and Rav Ben Zion Paschal like the Chazon Ish also, and he says, Ani lo mevin, yesh edut balayla? And edut balayla. There's no edut balayla. There's no edut in the nighttime. So therefore, he comes and he says, right, that since there's no edut in the nighttime, we're not doing it miturat edut, and therefore you do it without another person. You don't need to grab another person. You can do it on your own. That's the Chazon Ish and Rav Ben Zion Abba Shaul Paskin like the Chazon Ish. If I remember correctly, I think the Yalkut Yosef also goes like the Chazon Ish. That's what I remember, but don't quote me on that one. The Yalkut Yosef, don't quote me, but I think so. I do think so, but don't quote me on that one. Check. I don't want to say, that's why. But for sure, Rav Ben Zion Paskins like the Chazon Ish. Right? Okay? And that's one of the places where you see that the Chazon Ish was going lekula. Somebody just asked me that. The Chazon Ish always lechumra lekula. So here you're going lekula, right? It's not really a kula, but it's just his way of looking at it. Fine. So therefore, it comes out that according to the Gemara, it comes out that now we actually understand that a person becomes a partner with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have to understand what does that mean? He becomes a partner with Hashem. So he says like this. In order to understand what does that mean, we're going to understand what is the words of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. The Zohar HaKadosh says, Talmid Chacham, he comes and he says, Bo ureh, en ha'olam omed ela al ha-shalom. The olam is going to be standing on peace. Until he made them shalom. Umahu hu Shabbat. Why is Shabbat shalom? Right? Mind the pun on Shabbat shalom. Right? Why is Shabbat shalom? The shalom shel ha'elyonim v'tachtonim. He's making the peace between the olamot ha'elyonim and olamot ha'tachtonim. And therefore, ve'az nitkayem ha'olam. And then it's going to be nitkayem ha'olam. Then therefore, mi shecholek al shalom. Somebody that's arguing on the shalom is going to be destroyed from the world. So this is the Zohar HaKadosh. This is the Zohar HaKadosh in Parashat Korach. And that's where obviously he's talking about the Machloket. So now he comes, the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, and he says like this. Or HaChaim HaKadosh says, when it's written, Vaychal Elohim b'yom hashvi'i, El Yisrael b'yom hashvi'i, mashma, ki b'yom hashvi'i asa melacha, v'chila ota. It's mashma that he did melacha on the seventh day. And then he finished it. But it's not true. Because on the sixth day he finished it. So therefore, what's going on exactly? So he comes and he says, and then it was nitkayem ha'olam and interced. On the seventh day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu built, he created the nefesh of the world. Just like the goof without the neshama is nothing, the world without its neshama was nothing. What was the neshama of the world? The Shabbat. He comes and he says, that's a pshat, Pirush Bashabbat, Vayin Nafash, Pirush Nishpa Shefa Chiyuni Bechol HaNivraim. You have a spiritual, right? A spiritual awakening in the entire, before the Shabbat, there was no nefesh. Right now, all of a sudden, and that's why we have the Neshama Yitera on Shabbat. Right? Actually, everything is going to make sense. Right? Pay attention. It's all going to make sense. One second. Yeah. So he comes and he says, "Shenatnu tam." But the Zohar HaKadosh comes and he says, "Why is it that mitzvat Hashem is lamul b'yom hashmini, ve'lo lekarev korban laHashem ad yom hashmini? Ki atam wa'ad avor alav yom haShabbat v'yeh bal nefesh." He says, until the Shabbat, he still doesn't have the nefesh. Meaning, a human being, until he doesn't have the Brit Milah on the 8th day, it didn't pass by Shabbat. So he doesn't have nefesh. A korban. We just read it on the first and second day of Pesach, of Sukkot, sorry. It's also the first day of Pesach, right? But the shor uchesav is ki valed, vaya, bayom hashmini v'hala, right? It's only on the 8th day onwards you could bring a korban. Before the 8th day, you don't bring a korban. Meaning an animal has to be 8 days in order to bring a korban. A human being has to be 8 days until he has a Brit Milah. Why? Because only the Shabbat gives it its neshama. The Shabbat. Yes, they have the nefesh. Right? So he comes and he says, meaning, it's not that he worked on the 7th day. He worked on the 6th day and he finished. But by Chulu, Hashem finished it off on the 7th day. Not that he physically worked on the 7th day. When he put the neshama on the 7th day, which is Shabbat, into the Nibraim, now he finished his creation. Capish? When he finished, Levanta. Okay, so he comes and he says, that's the explanation of Yom HaShvi Melachto. And therefore he comes and he says, it's Tavar Ma'amid, U'Bemtzot Yom HaShvi Bo Nigmar Ha'inyan. And now we understand why the Torah came and it said, Briat Yom HaShvi Atzmo. Right? He comes and he says, Kevan Kedere Shodia Otanu Torah Briat Yom Yomo, Vayira Vayivoker. So he comes and he says, Ha'erev Va'avayat Gam Ken HaBoker. And we don't see that by other days. Why? Because it's completely different. It's a new creation. It's something completely new that came and changed everything. Okay? Then the Or HaChaim HaKadosh comes and he says, Kivo Shabbat, Ki Ha'olam Haya Chaser Kiyum. The world was lacking Kiyum Ha'olam until came Shabbat. And Shabbat came and it actually fixed the entire world. And that's why we see by HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he comes and he's going to be Megaleh by Aseret HaDibrot. He comes and he says, B'shat Abriya lo bara Hashem koach ba'olam zulat la'amod sheshet yamim. Only for 6 days. And if it wasn't for the 6 days, he would have destroyed the entire world. So therefore, the Shabbat was giving the zechut for the kiyum for the entire world. Okay, and therefore he comes and he says on the left side, right on page 7, right, Kolam Kadesh et Shabbat, if somebody sanctifies the Shabbat, he's actually going to come and he's going to be Mekayem the entire world as well. And that's why we need Davar Ma'amid, Tzaddik Yesod Olam, which is going to be a Shomer Shabbat. Ki Adam Shomer Shabbat, Haya Alav Shalom. He says Adam Rishon was also Shomer Shabbat. So he says V'acharav Kam Shet, and afterwards was Shet, that he was also Tzaddik Amur. And afterwards all the Tzaddikim. U'shezeh nofel kvar ba'Shemesh, Shomer Tzaddikim. He comes and he says there's another Shomer Shabbat. It was Metushelach, the Noach, Shem Abraham, which means that there was always Shmirat Shabbat in the entire world. It didn't exist once in the entire generations. It didn't exist without Shmirat Shabbat. You had, again, you already had from Adam. And afterwards you had from Shet. And then you continue going. And it always had Shomer Shabbat. Metushelach, Noach, Shem, Abraham. It continued going. And even in Mitzrayim, Hayu Shomer Shabbatot. And that's why he says that you needed it. Because if there's not going to be Shmirat Shabbat, there will be nothing. And that's exactly what we need. And now he comes and he says, the Or HaChaim HaKadosh is going to come and he's going to now go back in Parashat Yitro and Parashat Vayakel. And he's also going to be saying the exact same thing. Right? He comes and he says, what exactly are we referring to now? So he comes and he says like this. He comes and he says, ובאמצעות נפש העולם שהוא השבת שבר השם, יום זה מעמיד העולם עד ששת ימים. So it's going to come and he's going to have it for the 6 days. And the same thing he says in Parashat Vayakel. I'm not going to read each one. But then in the Pnei Or HaChaim HaKadosh, he comes and he says also that איך נתקיימה הבריאה במשך ששת ימי בראשית without the koach of Shabbat then. The first 6 days, how did it work? How did it work that you had the first 6 days without Shabbat? The Shabbat is what gives the strength. So he comes and he says, and therefore he comes and he says, Matzinu ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu gila davar b'ma she'amar Aseret HaDibrot, ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem et hashamayim et haaretz. Right? He says, Haregila ki b'shat habriya lo bara Hashem koach ba'olam zulat la'amod b'shvil sheshet yamim litam hanoda lo ki gam yadech chomemet. He says it was going to be like a, how do you call this? It was going to be a chesed that HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually did. Okay, and therefore that's why it's so. But it's over here like this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was gila, the fact that he said in Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Commandments, Ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem et haaretz. So he already said that it was only HaKadosh Baruch Hu that held up the world for 6 days. and then it was the Shabbat. Meaning that if it wasn't for the fact that it's true, without the Shabbat, there was nothing. And that's why he says that wasn't from Koach HaShabbat, that it came only from Hashem, right? That they could be Mikayim in Etzman. But after that, it was only the Shabbat. Only the Shabbat is what gives the strength. And that's why it says the Shabbat ba'olam is like the nefesh baguf. And therefore, b'zchut Shabbat mitbarachim sheshet yemei ha'maaseh. It says zachor et yom hashvat lekadoshot. Right? You have the we're on page 9. Right? It says zachor et yom hashvat lekadosho sheshet yamim ta'avo ve'asita kol melachtecha. Then it says vayanach b'yom hashvi. Says Rav Moshe Alshich, the Alshich HaKadosh. Ki shefa kedushat al-Shabbat haya la'olam keguf kanefesh haguf lekayemo. It's like the nefesh. שתקדש את עצמך מהחול כעבודת השם שתהיה הכנה לשבת. You're preparing yourself. And therefore, וזה תשפיע קידושה ביום, and then you're putting קידושה on everything. הכל נתברך ונתקיים על ידי שבת, which means you have all the bracha, everything can come through the Shabbat, everything. על ידי זכות השבת, כאילו עשית כל מלאכתך, it's כאילו you did all your מלאכה. That's the Al-Shich HaKadosh. Then it says, right, that we're talking about now the number 7. So when we're talking about now the number 7, the Maharal Miprag comes and he says, שהגשם יש לו חילופי וו צדדים ומעלה מטה ימין ושמאל פנים ואחור וכל 6 צדדים אלו מתייחסים לגשמיות. Whenever you have something which is going to be gashmi, you always have 6. Did you realize that we do 6 also? We do the 4 winds. How do you do the, right, when you're doing the Na'anuim, Hoshanot? South, north, east, west. It's 4 directions, up, down. It's always 6. The same thing with the rain. The rain you have the 4 directions and up, down. So you always have 6. Okay, the number 7, exactly, right? The 6. So he says the number 6 is the 6 dadim. You always have the 6 sides. 6 sides is always going to be something physical. He says the shvi, the 7th one, is always going to be something spiritual. It's not in any direction, but there's no gashmiut to it. It's the same thing with the 6 days. The 6 days is something physical. Comes the 7th day, it's spiritual. How many clouds do they have? How many clouds? 7. They had 7 clouds of glory. The 4 directions, up and down, and then the one which was directing them, which is going to be is always the one protecting them in general. That's the 7th is only spiritual. It's always the one which is above and beyond. And that's why there's 7 days of Sukkot. The 8th day is Shmini Atzeret. It's a different chag. The 7 days of Sukkot connect the 7 anei kavod, the 7 clouds of glory, and the 7 is what we just mentioned now, Shabbat, because it's always spiritual. 6 is always physical, because you have the 4 directions and up and down, and the 7th is the internal, is the inner, but it's not physical. So there's nothing there. Okay, that's what the Maharal Miprag says, and therefore the Maharal Miprag comes and he says the Mispar Sheva is a madrega shemitchaber biyachad hagashmi ubilti gashmi. The number 7 always connects something which is physical and spiritual. That's why Shemitah is also 7. There's a Shabbat is number 7. So he comes and he says, "V'lachin kolom tzayeh Hechal HaKodesh." That's why it's called Hechal HaKodesh. And therefore, he says, "B'mitzvah Shiva," right? You have Chol v'Kedusha. You have Shivat Yemei Shavua, and then also the Chodashim, Hashvi, V'Shanim, and also the 7th years. Also, when we're talking about in the months, the Chodesh Av. What's the 7th month? The Chodesh Shvi'i. Tishri. When the 7th month? 7th month is Kodesh. You have Rosh Hashanah, Kippur, Sukkot. That's Kodesh. Kodesh Yelachem. So also you have it. Okay, next. Midrash Vayikra Rabbah. The Vayikra Rabbah says, Lolam Shvi'i Chaviv. Shvi is always a 7. Number 7 is always going to be very precious. Shvi'it Chaviva Uvashana Shvi'it Shabbat Shabbaton Yelatz. Vayamim in days. Yom Shvi. Chodashim in months. Right? Shvi'i Chaviv. Chodesh Shvi'i. Brit Milah Bayom Shmini. Why? In order that you have a Shabbat. In every single person, you're going to have a Shabbat. Says Zohar Chaim HaKadosh, Parashat Tazria. He comes and he says, why do you have the Brit Milah Bayom Shmini? יהיה בו כוח לא בכל נהיה, כי כוח אמור דבריהם הוא כדי שיעבור עליו שבת ותגיע לו נפש החיונית. That he has a neshama. And therefore, once he has a neshama, he's going to be ben kayama. שבליל שבת הוא סעודת דחקל תפוחים קדישים. ועלייה למלכות והוא נקרא מטרומינה. שבטו שכוונתו, okay, there he comes and he starts now into the Kabbalah. This is עבודת ישראל. Right? The Magid Mikuzhnitz. That he comes and he says that. And therefore, that's why they come and they say that they do Shalom Zachar, Dafka, on the Friday night. Right? We would also do it on Friday night, but it's not called Shalom Zachar. We would do Brit Yitzchak. It's always in the night before the Brit Milah. The Reshit Chochmah. Right? There's no Shabbat. Just some. Now, but if it comes out on Shabbat, it's the Friday night before. Yeah. Reshit Chochmah, the Reshit Chochmah brings down in the Shara Kedusha. He comes and he says, Zechirat Shabbat b'chol yemei hashavua, also is trying to connect the nefesh into the Shabbat. Meaning, why every single day, whether it's Yom Sheni v'Shabbat, or even if you do the other way around, Hayom Yom Chamishi v'Shabbat Kodesh. Why are you always connecting it? So he comes and he says, Shiem Moneh Leshem Shabbat. Shimne b'Yom Rishon, Hayom Yom Echad b'Shabbat, Sheni b'Shabbat, Shishi b'Shabbat. Right? He doesn't bring down the Kodesh, he just says Shabbat. Well, that's what Shekol Hayamim Yonkim Yom Shabbat. Every day takes its nourishment from the Shabbat. HaShabbat is the Nekudat HaMerkaz, it's the center of everything. And Yimei Shabbat Yimei Shavua. And that's what he brings down, whether it's Rashbi, he brings it down from the Zohar HaKadosh. And yes, also. I mean 7. Yeah, 100%. Shabbat. And now when he comes and he says, when you find the Shabbat, so the Shabbat is actually surrounding everything. And the Sheva be'emtza nikrat kodesh. And therefore the 7, which is going to be in the middle, because all the rest is surrounding the Shabbat, which is in the middle. So therefore he comes and he says it's going to be kodesh. He actually has a picture here with the Shabbat in the middle, and then you have like the 6 different sides. You mean like a wheel, right? Of something like that. Then he comes and he says, and that's when it says Shamati mipi moriah Shalom, somebody that's going in the desert and he doesn't know when it's going to be Shabbat. So he comes and he says, and therefore he comes and he says, every single day is going to be like the Shabbat, that he's making it holy. And then he brings down the Shlach Kadosh also with the same thing, that every single day is actually coming and taking the
if he's in a desert and he doesn't know which day is Shabbat.
Bnei Yisachar comes and he says like this: He comes and he says like this. He says, according to the Orach HaKadosh, now we understand why it's a soul that there should be a tzara b'yom menuchatenu, and that's why we know the concept of the being mesameach chata v'kala. Meaning all the rest of the week you could have tzarot, but on Shabbat we don't want tzarot. And im yesh chas v'shalom ezi chisaron daka mina daka b'shoresh, it's nikar ha'inyan, and therefore it's not going to be good. That's why he comes and he says, "V'kevan sheyom menucha yeh b'mushlam b'li chaser." That's why we always come and say, "Yom menuchatenu." It's yom menucha. We don't want nothing lacking. We have everything that we need, and that's why he comes and he's bringing down also that's the Orach HaKadosh. According to the Orach HaKadosh, he comes and he says that's the inyan of the simcha, that we're going to be misameach hachatan and Shabbat before the wedding. So it's called Shabbat shemezamrin oto. They come and they sing to him. Tekevan shebetoch hashavua yesh simchat hachatuna. Since in the middle you've got the simchat of the chatuna, lachen tzrichim lesameach gam et Shabbat. You have to be misameach the Shabbat itself also. He says kasher Shabbat hi besimcha. So all the shavua, meaning like this, right? Imagine right now somebody has a birthday tonight. Yeah, he's got a birthday. Start singing. Yeah? So he's got a birthday. Yeah, Yom Holed Sameach. What? You want him to be Sameach. How do you make him Sameach? The Shabbat before. Because when you're Misameach Oto, the Shabbat before, automatically he's going to be Sameach during that week.
The
whole week. Because the Simcha of the Shabbat is going to have the effect on the rest of the week as well. And that's why it's the entire concept. That's why he says, the Shabbat before the wedding, sing to the Chatan. Make sure it's b'simcha, because that's going to affect the Chatan also on the day of the wedding. That's what he's coming to say. And that's why he says, Api Asod, Tavi Kol HaShavua Yonek Mi Shabbat. And he comes and he says, so Echaz Shalom Shabbat Yem Klalot, Yesh Chashad, so obviously not. And that's why he comes and he says, that's the inyan also of Shabbat HaGadol. He comes and he says, it's called Gadol, because look how it actually affected, that because of the Shabbat HaGadol, they went out of Mitzrayim. Meaning because of the koach of the Shabbat they had before, that's what actually came and helped them, that they were actually able to come out, right, the next week. Okay, so just understanding what it is. So he says, ולכן יש בשבוע איזשהו יום מיוחד, צריך כבר להכין אותו את יום זה בשבת קודם. So if you have something, prepare it already. Meaning you have something during the week, prepare it already before. So that way you don't have any problems whatsoever. Now he comes and he says, מכוח חידוש הבריאה בשבת, we're going to annul all the gzerot raot. And this is our main important part of the shiur. We want to come and we want to be annulling all the gzerot raot, whether it was what's happening. So what are we supposed to do? If it happened on Shabbat, so means maybe it's a message for us. What's going on with our Shabbat? So he comes and he says like this. Bnei Yisachar comes and he says, "V'shamru bnei Yisrael la'asot et Shabbat, la'asot et Shabbat." What does that mean? So he comes and he says, "What does it mean la'asot et Shabbat? Ma'u asiyat Shabbat? What do you mean you're making the Shabbat?" So he comes and he says, he brings on the Orach HaKadosh that you become a shutaf with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now he comes and he says, now you understand the pasuk. When we say v'shamru bnei Yisrael et Shabbat, bnei Yisrael keshehem shomrim et Shabbat, b'chtei la'asot et Shabbat ledorotam, שיצנו כוח העשייה ביום השבת לדורות עולם, שיצאו מן הכוח אל הפועל. That he comes and he says, when we come and we watch over the Shabbat, it's giving the strength in the Shabbat to come and to change everything that's going to happen in the future. And that's why the Zohar HaKadosh comes and he says on the days of the Shabbat, Kol shultanei rugzin u'manei dinim kulan arakim, ki b'Shabbat yicholin kol gzeh v'chol dinim litbatel. He says all the gezerot, all the bad things, everything, it could all be annulled on Shabbat. Why? Because Shabbat yicholin kol ha'gzerot v'chol ha'dinim litbatel, kevan shebechol Shabbat hu briat olam chadash. It's like HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world new. Meaning this past week was Geinam for everybody. But we could change that. How do we change that? Shabbat. When it comes Shabbat, and we're going to now change the Shabbat, to make it a Shabbat that all of a sudden we're going to keep the Shabbat, all of a sudden the entire Shabbat changes. The entire week will change next week. Why? Because we just came and we annulled everything on Shabbat. That's the power of the Shabbat. And therefore he comes and he says, Al pi el advarim ele, yiparesh lanu kavanat ha-mesorah, bara Elokim gimel desomche. Echa bereshit, it says that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it says, bara Elokim, 3 times. What does it mean? Bereshit bara Elokim Israel, bara Elokim la'asot, lemin hayom asher bara Elokim et adam al haaretz, al pi dvareinu miusadim l'divrei Or HaChaim HaKadosh, bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim l'tzomah b'tchila bara Hashem b'divrei hashamayim haaretz chutz v'am. Then afterwards bara Elokim la'asot, Hashem yibarach barat Shabbat. So the first time HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. The second time he created the Shabbat. V'aynu she'ivra הזמן עוד ו' ימים וכן בכל שבת. ועל ידי מי תהיה הפעולה הזאת? bara Elokim adam ve'en lecha kol dor shelu shel Shabbat, which means this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created 3 things. He created the world. But when he created the world, the Shabbat was still not there. Meaning he had to put the power in the world to exist for 6 days without the Shabbat. Then he came and he created the Shabbat. But he also created the human being. And the human being is Shomer the Shabbat. And by us being Shomer the Shabbat, and we always have Shomer Shabbat, we make the world always continue going. That's why we're Shutafim. We're the partners with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu to make the world continue going. And therefore we could actually come in and annul all the Gezerot. Why? It's Olam Chadash. It's a completely new world. And that's what's also brought down in the Elmaleh ben Ninov. Also the same thing. He says, but Pasuk Rabot, right? Rabot Raot Tzadiku Mikulam Yatzilenu Adonai. The Or HaChaim HaKadosh comes and he says, what does it mean Sheshet Yamim? Why does it say Velo B'Sheshet Yamim? Why does it say Sheshet Yamim Asa Hashem et Hashamayim? He's up in the 6 days, with 6 days. What's Sheshet Yamim? The Hashem Yibarach Bara Rak Shisha Yamim. Because Baruch Hu only created 6 days. Al Yidei Shminat Shabbat, but through the Shminat Shabbat that we are Shomer Shabbat, now we are creating another 6 days. That's what we always need, people that are Shomer Shabbat. If they're not going to be Shomer Shabbat, the entire world will be destroyed. And that's why a person could come and Yichol Shabbat leteken on everything. That we can actually change everything. When you have the word ra'ot, bad things, resh ayin vav taf, if you take and you add in 26, yud ke vav ke, to ra'ot, li'itavot havaya chadasha letov, hineu b'gematria Shabbat. Meaning when you come and you take ra'ot, resh ayin vav taf, how much is resh ayin vav taf? You have 600, 666, 666, correct? 666, add 26, 68692, 692. How much is Shabbat? Shin, 300. Tav, 400. Right? 702. We're missing something here. I made a mistake in the count. One more time. 26 to ra'ot. Right? וזהו רבות רעות צדיק, ומכולם יצילנו השם, which means that even though there's so many bad things that are going around, Hashem will save him, יצילנו השם. Yud Ke Vav Ke will save him when we come and we are going to be Shomer the Shabbat. When we're going to come and we're going to be Shomer the Shabbat. How do we just do this thing? One more time. Ra'ot, 400, 600, 70, 676. 676 and 26. No, that's what it is. 676 and 26. There you go. It's the 702. 676. Sorry, I just said 666. Sorry, 676. I had to make sense of the thing. The last one is Netivot Shalom. He comes in Netivot Shalom and he comes and he says as follows. Netivot Shalom, Shalom and Rebbe. He comes and he says the Shabbat is Neshamat B'riyah. So he says mashma shesiyum hamelacha haya b'Shabbat kufa and not beforehand. This is a mitzvah chiyuvit, and that's why he actually created the Shabbat. And that makes sense. What the Or HaChaim HaKadosh just came and he actually just said right now, because the Shabbat Kodesh is a b'riyah b'ifin. That's why it's not just stam. He stopped working. Shabbat. Some people think, what does Shabbat mean? Don't do work. Lie down on the couch all day and don't do anything. That's not Shabbat. But according to what we just said, it's the exact opposite. Shabbat is a Bria Chadasha to create something. What do you create? You create spirituality. You create ruchniut. The person's going to say, you know what? I'm going to sleep. Not only going to bagel. I'm going to say double bagel. I'm going to sleep 25. Mamash, I'm going to go all around. From the beginning of the Shabbat to the end of the Shabbat. I'm Mekayem Shabbat. You didn't do nothing. What did you do? It's not iyasiyat melacha. It's not that you're not doing work. It's you have to actually do something. So he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lefach nishmat chayim b'chol habriya. And that is going to be the Shabbat, which is just like the halachah HaKadosh came and he brought down. And therefore he comes and he says, we have to remember every single day the Shabbat. Every single day we come and say, Yom Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi. Why? Because that's going to come and it's going to give every single person, according to his Shabbat, is going to give the strength throughout the entire week about what's happening. And that's why they come and they say how holy it is the day of the Shabbat, that every single one of us, obviously we have a different Shabbat, but that Shabbat is a day of holiness. And that's why we're supposed to come and we're supposed to become closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that gives us the strength, the how do you call it? The animal, the oomph, the enthusiasm, right? In order to continue going, that's in essence what we're supposed to be doing on the day of Shabbat. Bezrat Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give a refuah shlema to all Cholei Amecha Yisrael. He should give yatzilem lirvacha et kol ha'asurim, et kol all the prisoners that they should get out, all the captives that they should get out. And Bezrat Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be yishmor v'yatzil et kol kochot ha'bitachon, et kol Am Yisrael, everyone that's going to be in Eretz Yisrael. Bezrat Hashem, and all of Am Yisrael b'chol makom shehem. Bezrat Hashem, Bezrat Hashem. Kol Adonai le'olam. Amen. Amen.